Just to start off very briefly, my name's Hiram Peck. I'm the planning director here in town. Most of you probably know me, hopefully from a good thing. We'll see what happens. But we think that this particular evening is an exciting one for us. We're here to start talking about Village District in a particular area of town. I think all the property owners that are in the area that we contemplated to be a village district received a letter talking about the fact that we'd like to consider, possibly consider, rezoning your property to a village district, and the consultants will explain to you tonight what that means. No decisions have been made about that. Your property hasn't been rezoned. There's no danger of any large big boxes or anything like that. We're trying to talk about something that's in context with the town. So I guess without wasting much time at all, I'd just like to say that the consultants that are here are from Carr, Lynch & Sandell. Angus Jennings is the lead consultant on that. John Ford is with Morris Beacon Design, and Russ Preston's with Principal Group, and Valerie's with Angus Jennings out of Carr, Lynch & Sandell. They're out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'd like to just, Emil, do you want to say a couple words for the process, or?
Not really.
No? Okay. All right. I'm always willing to hear. The Design Review Board, Emil Dahlquist is chairman of the Design Review Board. Alan Raphael is on Economic Development Commission. We're part of the committee that helps select the consultants, and so we think we've made a good choice, and we hope that after this meeting's evening, you'll think the same thing. So Angus, if you'd like to go ahead and start, we'll tell you how the program's going to run this evening. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Very pleased to be here. I'm Angus Jennings. I'm with Carr, Lynch & Sandell, and I'm both a planner who is leading the work on the regulation side of the contract, which we have not gotten into, but I am also the project manager, so any questions in terms of organizing the process and the sequence of meetings and coordinating the work of the design team, that's really what I am doing. So just to begin, I think I'll say on behalf of the entire team, we're very pleased to be working in the town of Simsbury. A number of members of our team have worked here previously, and it's a beautiful community, and I told Hiram and the committee it really in many ways sets the standard for other municipalities that are looking to manage change, manage growth through land use planning and regulation. Simsbury has done quite a lot well over the years, so certainly we are aware of that history, we're aware of that context, and it's our goal in the work that we do with the town to certainly meet the standard that's been set in the past. So as we begin our work, we look to what's been done before, both on the planning and regulations standpoint, to make sure that we understand the context for our work. And in the Weatogue Village, the primary references are the Plan of Conservation Development in 2007, the Town Center charrette in 2010, which, while not directly applicable from a location standpoint, I think that process was exemplary, and it was something that really the idea of getting as much public involvement as possible in collectively articulating a vision for what wants to happen from a public policy standpoint as growth and development inevitably happens over the course of time, and how to best channel that investment in a way that advances the community's goals. I think the Town Center charrette really set that standard, and tonight's workshop is the first, the kickoff meeting in a similar, albeit somewhat scaled back for Weatogue, given the size of the area, but our goal is to arrive at a similar outcome. There was work done in coordination with a number of state agencies and town with the Route 10 corridor study, and then the town-wide design guidelines, which were initially adopted, I believe, in 2001, and amended just this past fall to reflect, among other things, the town center work. So the Plan of Conservation and Development specifically called for a charrette approach to the Weatogue area, and so that's what we're here to begin. So as Hiram mentioned, the scope of our work includes looking at Weatogue as a potential village district. It was recommended within the Plan of Conservation and Development that the town consider that. So I wanted to just say a few words about what that statute is, what it does, what it can do. And I've got just a couple of excerpts here. The statute authorizes the adoption of local zoning districts, which and I'll quote, "shall protect the distinctive character, landscape, and historic structures within such districts, and may regulate new construction, substantial reconstruction, and rehabilitation of properties within the districts in view from public roadways." So I'll tell you, having looked at land use statutes in a number of different states, I look at this as a planner as very empowering language. It gives the municipality a lot of latitude. It provides not only for regulation of new development or redevelopment or renovation, but it also explicitly authorizes the adoption of a village district to protect the distinctive character. So one of the threshold issues that we'll be talking about tonight as we get into the interactive sessions is with the residents in Simsbury and the merchants and the people who spend the most time living, working, recreating in this part of the community. One of the questions we'll ask you to delve into in some detail is which elements of this land area really ought to be protected because they are perfect just the way they are, and which elements of the neighborhood could benefit from reinvestment over time, and how could that best be directed. So our overall approach to the project is I'm on kind of the regulation side. The rest of the team is really tilted toward the design side, and both John and Russ will get into specific comments on that. But as I look at this project from a project management standpoint, I want to see how the design process plays out. I want to see how that vision evolves, both with the professional designers, the design professionals who are also active in the community, and the people who live and work here, to see that vision play out. And then my job as the planner and the project manager is to work with Hiram's office and municipal council if zoning amendments are recommended to get those regulations in a place that will reinforce the community's objectives. So we'll be drawing from the adopted policy plans, plans and policies from the past, from the ideas that we hear both tonight and in future public, the next public workshop, and really what is that vision. So we'll be working in close coordination. So Hiram gave you a bit of the lay of the land. This is just to make it kind of the division of labor. Valerie she's kind of got a foot in both camps, if you will. She is an architect trained at UC Berkeley, but she's an intern architect. She's working kind of under the direction of some extraordinarily talented architects in our shop. And Russ and John are really leading the design portion of this work. So Valerie is both providing support to me on the regulation side and has design skills as well. So I wanted to say just a couple of words about Kevin Lynch. He's the founding partner of Carl Lynch and Sandell, and I was heartened to see that this quote on the right, which I won't, I will read in a moment, is I actually excerpted this direct from your townwide design guidelines. Kevin Lynch is one of the luminaries of the planning and design field. He was teaching at MIT in the 60s and 70s and is really one of the founding thinkers of this way of thinking about the built environment, its interaction with the natural environment, and the method and the way of thinking that he really set out. I know as I started to read his work, and I had been reading about urban planning for years, and I said, geez, a lot of what I read is actually derivative of what Kevin Lynch was writing about 4 decades ago. So he wrote here, site planning is the art of arranging the external physical environment to support human behavior. It is not simply a collection of buildings and streets, but a system of structures, surfaces, spaces, living things, climates, and details. So our work to date, we are fairly early in the process. We've taken a look at the existing conditions, both on the ground through site walks, as well as reviewing the existing regulatory framework. The present mix of zoning, you can see an excerpt of the zoning map for the Weatogue area. It's a mix of business, residential, and industrial zoning. And the village district statute, if the community decides to go in that direction, offers a real opportunity to establish proactively a vision for how this area could change over time, and then gives the town hall the authority through permitting decisions to enforce that decision in its future permitting. The second major piece of planning, which isn't as much part of our scope, but there's been a lot of work done in the past, and there's some work or some thinking that's happening through our team, is the public realm, the infrastructure, the area within the right-of-way, whether that's roads, whether that's the rail trail. It's basically how does the private space on the development lots interact with the public realm, and we're very fortunate to have John Ford, who's a civil engineer, so we're giving some thought to that. So as the process moves forward, we will have a second public workshop. We haven't set a date for that, but hopefully you sign up on the email list and we'll get that date out very quickly. And tonight is really about listening, framing a conversation, and hearing what people have to say. And at the next workshop, it will be more of a presentation of a vision, and that will be really coming from the design side based on what they've heard and some of the thinking that they're doing. And as part of that, at the second workshop, we'll be setting out on the regulations in more detail how that would work under the village district statute, what types of elements of new construction are able to be regulated under that, and how would that work, especially on this issue of preservation versus new development or redevelopment. Then at a third public meeting, if the community goes in that direction, that would be the presentation of a recommended bylaw and design standards. And building on the tradition that's been established here in Simsbury and elsewhere, that would be a combination of text-based regulation and graphics to really make crystal clear to the development community what it is that the town of Simsbury expects going forward. So a bit about the method, and I'll refer again to Kevin Lynch. He introduced a clear vocabulary to help think about urban design or town design, and he introduced the concept of paths, edges, nodes, districts, and landmarks. And there's some graphic illustrations on the right that this is some analysis that he did of the city of Boston. And basically, beginning with that basic vocabulary helps to think about how does that area function? Where are people going to? Why are they going there? What are the barriers? What are the pathways? And so forth. Within a place, each element typically exists in differing scale and form. And tonight's workshop is intended in part to help us understand how the people who live, work, and recreate in this area, how it functions today, and what's your vision for the future. So then I've got just a couple of snapshots, which we've got some kind of visual images scattered around, and I don't know. We'll get into this in the interactive portion, who's coming from where, who lives there, who works there, who lives elsewhere in town, but certainly what you get walking around the Weatogue area is far different from what you might expect looking at an aerial. You know, there's a lot of detail there that might not be immediately evident, and for people who are simply driving past on Route 10, they may not really see or appreciate that detail. So I think there's an opportunity here to build on some existing strengths, some obvious amenities with the river and the rail trail, and to make those more prominent in the district. So I'll wrap up and then turn it over to John Ford. I would certainly encourage you to sign up, and we can send out updates. And I've also put our email addresses, which we can share later. And we welcome comments and questions. So thanks, John.
All right, thanks, Angus. My name's John Ford. I'm a civil engineer, and my firm, Morris Beacon Design, did the stormwater module a couple of years ago. So stormwater design guidelines and stormwater code for the whole town with a specific focus on the town center. So these are groundbreaking documents. We've been to Simsbury a number of times over the last couple of years, and Hiram and I have been speaking across New England about these documents. So we're very excited to be back working again in Weatogue. So what I wanted to talk about is kind of connecting what Angus was with his introduction to framing what you folks are going to be doing this evening at tables and looking in more specific detail at Weatogue. So Angus mentioned the word exemplary in talking about the town center charrette and the work at the town center. I think the plan of conservation and development is also exemplary when we look at it, and I'll tell you why. Organizing growth and organizing looking at existing communities by form instead of by use. So the plan of conservation and development has looked at the special areas identified in the town as form categories. So instead of saying retail over here, residential over here, industrial over here, special areas within Simsbury, whether they be existing areas valued by the community like the town center, Weatogue, or maybe areas that are identified for growth in the future that don't have so much growth right now, fit into these form categories, making it easier to talk about the vision for those places and then getting into a future by design, which Russ is going to talk about. Weatogue has been identified as a village center. All the work I think you are most familiar with the town center, you see second from the right as a place of kind of high intensity, a lot happening there, the most vital area within town, and village center being kind of a step down from that. So instead of, again, saying use, retail, industrial, residential, we're organizing by the intensity of building form, and then we're talking about zoning and design. All of the attributes and variables of the built environment can be calibrated to that, to the intensity, from the design of streets, building setbacks, building form, building height, the variables of urban design. So you can go ahead, another one, Russ. Again, from the plan of conservation and development, those are the special areas identified within town. The town center has been addressed in an exemplary fashion. Weatogue Center, which you see near the bottom, is next, and that's why we're here this evening. Very quickly, the Simsbury Center Code is a form-based code, looking at the center, what is special in terms of buildings, places that need to be protected. You can move on, Russ. That's the vision that's been identified in the code. So then looking at the variables, whether they be designing new blocks that fit into the existing context, designing street sections, or parking requirements that fit that vision that the town has expressed. And that's what it looks like in the zoning language. So these are the regulations that describe that vision. And that was the initial vision that led to the specific variables and design and requirements in the town center code. So when we look at Weatogue, go up one, and move ahead one more. Identified as a village center, moderately scaled mixed-use activity center with development intensity appropriate to the specific neighborhood context. If you go ahead one more. This is really as specific as the plan of conservation and development gets, a form type, a form category of village center. So the vision for place enable its individual characteristics to stand out, specific form-based design criteria to ensure that the village retains historic characteristics, and economic vitality is enhanced. So I'm going to hand it over to Russ to talk in a little bit more detail about what that means when looking at the variables of design. One of the themes of the plan and conservation and development is future by design, and then talking more specifics about what you all are going to do this evening related to that.
Thanks, John. Very good. Good evening, everyone. My name is Russell Preston. I run a company called Principal Group. We focus on creating authentic places. We do plans like this, urban design and planning work, from the large-scale master planning down to the small public spaces. So why is authentic places important to us? Because this is about livability, about improving people's lives. And I always look at Norman Rockwell and these paintings of small town America. And how do we build that back into our built environment is the questions I ask a lot of the times. And you see these images of New England, and I always think of this when we come to towns and cities across the region. And really, there's a thing happening across the country now that places like Simsbury are benefiting from, and that's the rediscovery of small town life and of urban life, of knowing your neighbors and being able to walk to destinations. And for me, it really sums it up. The left side is the mall, the typical food court. And I think more people are tending towards the right, which is a more authentic experience of a small cafe, small courtyard. And I apologize, these images are a little dark. So just before I dive into sort of our exercises for the day, I wanted to take everyone through sort of some trends that are happening so everyone's aware of that, and then specifically some of the design principles that I think we should use to guide our work here this evening. So placemaking is a word that, how many people have heard that term? Anyone? A few folks? All right, so placemaking is about, this vision, this, how do we actually look at what's there today and see into the future, and then allow it to develop into what we want. And this is by design. And our zoning code are what allows that vision to happen. So this term gets thrown out a lot in planning circles, and this is an example of how placemaking can happen very quickly. And you can see the dates down below, but it was a parking lot before, and now it's something else, something more vital, something more, enhances the livability of that little section of Brooklyn. So, but placemaking can also occur in small towns. This is in North Adams, Massachusetts, small city in Massachusetts. But this is the morning, this is the afternoon. And it's this idea that people like to do things in their town, and we should enable our built environment to support that type of community, that type of society. So another sort of trend is this idea of resilience, this economic resilience. And we're seeing this around the country, is looking at, how do we pay for our infrastructure, how do we pay for our maintenance, how do we actually build our town so that it can support itself going forward. And this is partly due to the fact that we've built across the country now in sort of sprawl, auto-oriented form, but this demographic shift is happening where older generations, the baby boomer generation and the millennial generation, the two largest generations in American history, both want very similar lifestyles where they can walk to the coffee shop or walk to work. And you can see this in this trend happening, but what it also means on the ground, though, is we can benefit from going back to a more resilient form of development. This is a colleague of ours, did some work down in Asheville, and you can see just from analyzing the tax rates that a more compact form of development that is mixed use actually has better return on the investment for that infrastructure for the town. And then from an economic development standpoint, and this is downtown Asheville, but we've seen this studied around the country, and it holds true that this auto-oriented versus people-oriented tends to have more resilience on the economic side as well. So this is an important trend to keep in mind that kind of informs the work we're doing. And then a word is getting thrown around, retrofitting, a lot, and how do things evolve in this sort of landscape that we have around towns. And you see a lot of this, and you can go into Borders and buy some of these books now about letting the suburbs kind of grow up in this sort of next wave of development. And this is another colleague of ours who does some great work. This is a typical sort of countryside road in anywhere USA. And as things develop in a certain form, this is by design. Our zoning has been written to allow this to happen, and then allow this to happen. And this is what a lot of towns, unfortunately, have done to a good chunk of their real estate. But there's another way to do this, and this is when we get back to the vision. What do you really want this place to be in Weatogue? And another form that we could design and then build into our zoning code is something that ends up creating a much more beautiful place. And this is showing taller buildings and great street trees and street life. And there's a variety of ways that we can build small towns. And that's partly what we're going to talk about today is what's the vision? Is it more to the left or more to the right? Or is it somewhere in between? Or is it somewhere lower in intensity or higher in intensity? So getting to, just so we all kind of share a common language, there's some principles and sort of common elements of planning in this sort of traditional neighborhood philosophy. And it starts with a 5-minute walk. This is sort of the smallest scale of the neighborhood, is really a person who kind of feels comfortable walking that 5 minutes. I'll walk 5 minutes to get my mail or to get a cup of coffee. And this is not something that we've made up. This is something that over centuries humans have built this way. And you can see all around Europe and Asia, on every continent, this 5-minute sort of, the smallest increment of development. And then looking at our site here, you can see sort of Route 10 and the sort of river to the right. We started saying, okay, what's the structure of this from a scale of the human? From your own 2 feet, where can you really go? And so that center there to the edge is 5 minutes, and that kind of matched what we saw on the street when we started to walk around. But then, when we were on the street, I realized, and I started to think, there's actually maybe 2 neighborhoods here because the character is slightly different. This is a question I want to ask you this evening is, when you kind of go south, sort of towards Maggie's and that area, is that a different neighborhood or is it still Weatogue? And when you go north, towards the inn and that direction, are those different? Do they have different characters? Should they evolve differently? Or should they be really one? And that's, a dialogue I think we should get into a little bit more this evening. And so this, kind of going down into finer grain, neighborhood character, what makes this place special? And that's something you should think about and tell us tonight. We're here to listen. We're here to, for you to tell us what you think is special here. And, there's a lot of great examples of nice New England architecture, good monuments. These are the elements of this place that I think are really unique, and sort of we can build off these forms and understand what is great about this architecture or this type of building. These trees, for example, which I think are spectacular in the summer. But then also, what are the characters that we might want to evolve and we might want to suggest further? How can we take advantage of natural features that are next to developable land? And then how do we, the rail trail here is to the left, and how is that a unique feature? I mean, I'm amazed every time I come to Simsbury the amount of traffic that's on that. So what can we, what should be next to that, and how should that evolve? And this gets into another pattern we should pay attention to. This is mobility options. People sort of typically just get in their car and drive somewhere, but what if you could walk or bike? And this idea that people should have options year-round in New England is great. And I see, I was taken back when I saw this sculpture at the trailhead. But really, the bicycling is a phenomenon that's happening across the country that we could build off of even further. But walking, I think, is a place we need to really, really pay a lot of attention to. And if people don't see that there, that's a mother with her baby walking down the street. So people are walking in Simsbury in this area. And how can we enhance that further? What should this vision improve upon that? And I love seeing these. These are, I'm not sort of ragging on Simsbury. These are all over New England where you have a curb ramp with no sidewalk. So there's a disconnect. It's really about connecting these nodes and making sure that people feel comfortable walking around their neighborhood. And this gets to the public realm. Angus mentioned this, context-sensitive design. Context means you're aware of your surroundings. And we've been battling for decades now, Department of Transportations across the country and nationally, to really design in a form that matches the lifestyle or the activities and uses that are adjacent to that street. So on the left, that's designed for a fire truck and for 50-mile-per-hour traffic. On the right, that's designed for humans. They're both residential neighborhoods. It's just this idea that the street one's a street and one's a road. One's for people, one's for cars. And engineers are starting to get this. So you're getting less of the left and more of the right. And how can we reintroduce that form of public infrastructure or thoroughfare types into Simsbury? And why is this important? Context-sensitive street design isn't just pretty, it isn't just nice to be on, it's safer. And there's data coming out now about fatalities with pedestrians and vehicle injuries. And you can see from the chart on the right that you've got a much better chance of surviving when cars are moving slower. So design speeds have to come down. And there are many tools that we can talk about how to do that. And you can just, this is some of the engineering that's coming out. So, we walked this street and feared for our lives at certain times. So there's an idea that if we're going to build a place, we need to think about both the street and the buildings that front it and sort of balance those two. And then, looking at this intersection, there might be quick things that could happen early on. Just the curb radius of this is quite large. With just, there are cities around the country now that are just laying paint down to make that curb radius look smaller and feel smaller. So there are ways very quickly that this intersection will become more safe. So leading to the street, the street is actually an outdoor room. You have it here in the town center. And if this is going to evolve into a village center, well, is an outdoor room what we see there? And, looking around at other projects, outdoor rooms can take a variety of shapes. There can be squares, parks, community gardens, places to congregate, places to go have a quiet lunch, romantic places, spiritual places. So think about all of those. And, we were walking on the site, I started thinking, there's this sort of natural stormwater ravine. Well, could that evolve into something that's more of a place, a park, a gathering place? And then looking at this sort of main intersection here, this sort of weaving of all these streets, which during the Route 10 corridor study, they came up with a really clever design that I call sort of a square about. It's really Weatogue Square. And this is actually, with just the pavement and the right-of-way that already exists today, you could have a real nice neighborhood square, with trees and parks and gathering spaces. So we think this is an idea worth building off of. And if you disagree or agree, we'd like to hear that tonight. And you guys have, could you hold it just a second? Let me finish and we'll come to questions later. Connections to the nature, which is part of your public space. And, we see this all over New England that, conservation of our natural landscape is a great resource. And you guys have this tremendous river. How do we get people down to that river? How do we use that river and connect that better to the Weatogue neighborhood? Which I think this is sort of the closest between Route 10 and the river that there is. So we walked down there and I was amazed that this is this great asset that could be an opportunity. So these are questions we've been having that I want to just get your reaction to tonight. And it's been mentioned before, encourage this mix of uses is important. And this in the ideal state, you could walk to all your daily needs. The left, you could walk there, but you might not like it. But on the right, you could walk there and feel a lot more comfortable. So this is accomplished in a certain form. And just as this here is, the left is mixed use and the right is mixed use. You've got McDonald's and housing, you've got McDonald's and housing, but they're different forms. So how you do mixed use is important, and how these things blend together in a certain way can make place or can destroy place. And there's already a mix of uses in this area. So how do we make sure we build off of those good things that are there already? And this gets to the soft side of this, is like, what are people doing here? And what destinations are here already? How do we connect the inn with the banquet hall? How do we connect these activities and destinations within the neighborhood already? And then everything's going to come back to parking. I know you're going to tell me parking is a big problem here. But I want people to put that aside for a second. Tonight's about vision, and tonight's about looking at what this place really needs to do in 10, 20 years. So parking, think about parking as an opportunity, not just a limitation. Where there are small neighborhood public parking facilities around New England that, when they're not fully occupied, become farmers markets. So parking can become this asset, this sort of mixed-use asset in its own right. So it's this idea that you could park once. And that in this neighborhood, you don't need to have 5 parking spaces for one car. You can have 1 parking space for 1 car and be able to walk 4 or 5 minutes between places. So street frontage helps do that by making these streets more important. So you see the house on the left, you don't even see the street, it's set back so far. The house on the right, it has a relationship to its public realm, to its sidewalk. And you see this in mixed use as well. So there are patterns around New England that we should look to and build from, even in the town that exists already. So looking at the setbacks of buildings in the neighborhood already is something we started to do. And how can those evolve? How can those be enhanced through either landscape or buildings? And this gets to how, to really pull this all together requires a compact form. Buildings in New England and in small towns and villages are related to each other in a much closer and compact way. So just some more images from our colleague. This is sort of the typical street you see across the country, but with some clever thinking and some good public-private public infrastructure with private investment, you can get places that evolve into something that is much more compact and much more livable. So my question for you tonight is, what do you see for the future of this area? And that's really what we're here to talk about is your vision. So how are we going to do that? So going forward, we've got 3 exercises for you tonight. 2 are at the tables, and 1 you can really do on your own or during our little break in between the first and third exercise. But the first exercise is, what do you love about your neighborhood today? What do you want to preserve? What's great about it? What building, what landscape, this one tree, this one bush? Let's be very specific about what's great. And I want you to draw on the map together and mark those in the same color. And make note of those. And each table will have a facilitator that you can talk about what they are. But really it's just, we've got these maps of the 2, sort of the neighborhood, the sort of northern part and the southern part. But really circle it. Make sure we know what it is that that's great and you want to preserve and build from. So, put dots all over it if you want, or put 1 dot, whatever you feel like. And then exercise 2, and this you can do at any time. If you need a break, you want to step up and go to the back of the room and do this exercise, feel free, or we'll have a little break, a little 10-minute break here in a little while. But exercise 2 really is, we're going to give you 5 dots, 5 green dots and 5 red dots. And on the maps in that center table in the back here, we want you to place 5 green dots on stuff that you love, stuff that you really think is great about this neighborhood. And then I want you to put 5 red dots on places that need to be improved. And you can define that however you feel. But just, it could be a sidewalk, it could be an intersection, but what needs to be improved? And then the third exercise after our break will be really where I want you to sort of think long term, think out of the box, in the box, beside the box, wherever you want to be, about this area. And from our sort of first exercise, build from there. And really sketch, draw. We will be at the table with you. If you don't like to draw, we'll help you. But really it's about marking up and telling that story about what you see happening here. And that's for you to define and really for us to listen. So those are what we have in store now. So I think we'll take, we could dive right into it. And I'll, everyone knows who everyone is now. You have one question, right? Do you want to ask?
Question, comment.
Okay.
Could you explain to everyone here, because I think it's an important point, is that why complete streets? Because I think that is, under Commissioner Redeker, a program as to why that sidewalk to nowhere could not happen.
Right.
Today. So what's the difference between Governor the Rell administration and the Malloy administration in terms of complete streets? If you would explain to everybody here, 60 seconds or less, what complete streets is.
Yeah, okay. Well, let me go back to an image. So the question is complete streets.
Complete streets.
So complete streets is a movement we're seeing around the country about street design. And this really comes about the equality of mobility. So bicycles, cars, pedestrians should all have a facility on a street that is safe and allows them to get where they need to go.
ADA compliant.
Right. And that goes into ADA. So ADA is handicap accessible, has certain facilities for blind people, for immobile people, and that, that is being rolled out throughout, I believe, Connecticut. I'm not super familiar with the Connecticut statutes.
It's law in Connecticut now.
Yeah.
Am I correct or am I incorrect? Yeah. Under any building that goes on, that's why you see on Route 44, any of the buildings that are on Route 44, you'll see sidewalks from nowhere along Route 44. But that's under the current administration. So you cannot, what you saw in Abigail's, which you kind of made fun of a little bit, that can't happen today. So just,
Yeah, that's changing. Yeah, and this is that when a DOT does a project, they're required to put in sidewalks that actually allow people to get places. So this is being taken care of at the state level. It's happening in other parts of New England as well. So that's something we can build from in this process too. And we're hoping to engage some of the folks at DOT in this conversation during this process. So I think that was an important point to point out, that things happen. In architecture, they take years, months sometimes. In urban, larger projects, it can take years, decades, or longer. So So this is why we really want to stretch your minds tonight and think long-term and what's the real grand vision for this place. This is just complete streets have crosswalks, they have facilities for bikes and walkers, all ADA compliant. So why don't we, everyone's at their table. If you want to move, but we're going to have 4, I think we have enough chairs. So those folks in the back, if you want to join a table, we'll have 4 tables. And the first exercise.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.